Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining our webinar today on fire safety. It's an important topic. Before we get started, I would like to thank our partners that promote our webinars with their members, Tri-State Safety Association, MPMA, the Fargo-Moorhead HBA, ABC of North Dakota, Minnesota, NRASP, the Northern Region of Association of Safety Professionals, BLD Connection, and Lakes Area Manufacturers Alliance. Each webinar, we get a few attendees that aren't quite sure what OECS does. And so just a brief intro that we can be a client's or a company's total safety solution, anything from on-site assessments to gap analysis to in-facility audit, training, whatever component of safety that your organization might need assistance or maybe just verifications that things are good and in place, we can help out. So you can reach out to either of those two numbers, the Twin Cities, our corporate office, or Fargo office, which is on the Dakota side. A couple of things for housekeeping during our webinar today. If you would please enter any questions into the chat. At the end of the webinar, we will go through any questions that are in the chat. So we're just going to hold off until the end because we feel that a lot of what the questions might come through might get answered throughout the webinar. We won't share the presentation, but we do record it. So within about 24 to 48 hours, we will have the video on our website. So feel free to go back out there, rewatch, share with your teams if you need to, and use it as a resource, or reach back out to our speakers. And so I'd like to, with that, talk about our presenters today. You'll have Clark Dietz and Steve Sylvester, both out of the Dakota's office. So I'm going to step out of this screen and I'm going to welcome them. They'll introduce themselves. I hope everyone has a great webinar. Thank you.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm Clark Dietz. A little bit about my background. I spent 30 years with the Fargo Fire Department. I was a captain on the hazmat team. I live here in Fargo. I've been with OECS about 14 months.
And I'm Steve Sylvester. I was also a firefighter for the city of Fargo for 26 years. I spent a good portion on that in our technical rescue team. And Clark and I were fortunate enough to be on the same crew and on the same shift for quite a bit of our tenure there. So we've spent quite a bit of time together, and we're excited about presenting some information today.
Steve, what are some of the training topics that we're going to talk about?
Well, like Melissa stated, we're going to go through the OSHA standards about fire prevention plans and emergency action plans. We're going to talk about doing a fire hazard assessment in your facility, and then go through some of the common causes of fires in facilities. So, Clark, when we talk about emergency action plans, what specifically would we have those for?
Well, I tell you, the employer, it's basically what kind of emergencies can that employer expect? Obviously, fire. Every building, every structure is susceptible to fire, right? So we need to think about that. What part of the country do you live in? Are there tornadoes? Are there floods? Are there blizzards? Are there hurricanes? So you need to take a look at that. What kind of natural emergencies might you guys run into? Do you live by a river? You need to consider those things. Here in Fargo, obviously, we live by the river. So we've done quite a few flood fightings, and you need to have some type of a plan for that. Also, do you have a lot of chemicals in your facility? Are you right by a rail station? Are you in a farm community where chemicals are transported? You need to have something in place that addresses these possible things.
Clark mentioned the absence or the facility having quite a bit of chemicals, and those chemicals need to move from facility to facility. And if you look at the picture on the far right, you see a railway, I'll call it a disaster. Not too long ago, 15, 20 years ago in Minot, North Dakota, we had a railway incident with ammonium
Anhydrous
ammonia. And that was devastating for that community. One person actually perished in that. So those are the types of things that your facility needs to have a plan in case they do happen. And then also the active shooter. You know, the world we live in today, it's definitely a thing. And you know, we can spend a lot of time coming up with plans for all kinds of things requiring active shooter scenarios, things like that. So that is something that we have to take a look at it these days. So, Clark, when we talk about emergency action plans, what are some of the minimum requirements that you'll need to have in your plan?
Well, it's important that you have all of these things in there. It really is. The procedure for reporting a fire emergency. What are you going to do? Do you have an alarm system? Is it outdated? Some people have just audible where they yell, right? Some people have an air horn. Do you have some people with special needs in the facility that you need to account for? And then emergency evacuation procedures. Where are you going to go? Are you going to meet somewhere? Are all the exits clear? Can everybody get out of those exits? And then some people have a procedure for shutting down certain equipment or grabbing certain important files. We really don't recommend that coming from the fire service. Some people call them rovers. If you have a fire or an emergency, we want you to get out. There's absolutely nothing in that building, right? That's so important that you need to risk a life to do that. And then once we get outside, how are we going to account for them? Who's going to be responsible for accounting for them? Is there one person? Is there two people? Is it going to be accounted for in groups for everybody? What are we going to do? Here's why accounting for those people is so important. Once you get outside, and let's just say that there's a fire, we need to know that everybody's out, because the very first thing that fire department is going to ask somebody there is everybody out of the building? And if two people decided, I'm going to get in my car because it's cold outside and we're going to take off, the fire department's going to think those two people are in there. And they're going to go in, they're going to risk their lives, and they're going to start looking for them. So it's important, very important, that we have accountability for everybody that's in that building when they do get outside. And then, of course, training. We need to train them on that. Steve, who should review this emergency action plan with the employees?
Well, the management for sure. But if we go back to training, there are certain times when we need to train the employees and make sure they're trained, because we all know that you can have the best plan in the world, but if your employees don't know about it, aren't aware of it, don't know what their role is in it, then the plan is going to fail. And so when you first implement your plan, maybe you didn't have one before, or you completely went through and scrubbed your old one, all the employees need to be trained at that point. And then after that, anytime somebody new gets hired, part of their new orientation, whether it take a week or 2 weeks, whatever the time frame is, it's a very important part of that orientation that they are aware of this plan and what their part is in the plan. And then also, you know, if you have employees moving around, maybe somebody got promoted, maybe somebody got demoted, maybe they switched to a new section of the facility. And so their responsibilities may have changed. Maybe who they report to changed. And then whenever you change the plan, you know, it doesn't have to be the minor changes, but, you know, Clark talked about accountability being the most important. So yeah, whenever you change the plan, you're going to need to obviously train your employees on it. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about fire prevention.
Some of the minimum requirements that you're going to need for that fire prevention plan: a list of all major fire hazards. Now, you guys, this might just be a whole bunch of pallets stacked up in one section of the building, right? Or it could be flammable materials, flammable liquids. The process to control these flammable and combustible waste materials. How are we taking care of them? How are we labeling the area that people shouldn't smoke in? Little things like that you need to think about. Regular maintenance of heat producing equipment. Who's responsible for that? Is the employee that works with it? Maintenance, is there a third party? Is there somebody from the outside that comes in and takes care of that? That needs to be written down. That needs to be in the plan. And employees, are they responsible for those fuel sources? If they are, they need to know about it. Steve, you want to talk about some general fire industry statistics?
Sure. Fire isn't anything new. We've been dealing with fire and its causes and effects for many, many decades. But you look at some of the numbers here, 37,000 factory fires jumps out at me. But Clark and I know from being involved in a lot of these fires that a fire inside of a factory may not be classified just as a factory fire. The more important number here is the 7,200 structure fires. Now, that's what the actual structure of your facility is on fire. And if you break that down and do the math, that's almost 20 a day. And that's a lot. And then, of course, the effects of that are the deaths and then the cost of it. And that's a cost that continues on, too. So Clark's going to discuss, we've got a small video here about some of the effects surrounding a major fire in Charleston.
Yeah, this, you guys, a short video about a fire in Charleston. We'll talk about it when it's finished.
Charleston Fire, how can I help you?
Yes, sir. I'm at Sofa Superstore on Highway 17. There's a huge fire on the back of the house. You need to turn that out, though. Huge.
Sofa Superstore?
Highway 17. You need to open that side gate, man. You need to be able to get through this.
Okay, what's the address for me?
What's the address, sir? 1807 Savannah Highway.
And what's burning in the back?
It's in the back of the Sofa Superstore.
Okay.
It's like a little shed.
Okay, gotcha. I'll have somebody out there. That's fine. 1807 Savannah Highway.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
As rush hour wound down, passers-by reported black smoke curling into the sky above the store. The first fire crews arrived on the scene shortly after 7 p.m. and found a small trash fire burning along the loading dock. As firefighters ventured into the store, the blaze spread inside. Soon they were trapped in a maze-like layout of furniture as superheated air and thick smoke enveloped the main showroom. Firefighter David Griffin was manning the pumps on an engine parked outside as the fire took a turn for the worse. As his fellow firefighters struggled to escape, flames exploded through the showroom and the situation became dire.
When the front part of the building fell, the parapet wall fell to the right of the engine, I looked up and said, who's going to extinguish the fire? And I was like kind of out of my own body. I was out of reality. And I realized that, well, we have to extinguish the fire. So that was when it really hit me that something's not going well. It's not going the way that we've had it happen before. We've always been very successful. So for me, that's when it really hit me. And I didn't know that anybody was lost or missing. Because it was so chaotic on the radio as the pump operator, I wasn't really listening to the radio, unfortunately, because I was running around trying to do a lot of things. And so I didn't realize it until guys walked up to me and said, hey, we could be missing some people. And I couldn't believe it. And then we started to hear rumors of how many, and it was mind-blowing.
Firefighters raced in from all over to help, including many who were off duty at the time. Brian Brown was among them. He'd been working out at a gym when he got a call that his friend Louis Mulkey might be among the missing.
Going over the bridge, I can see the column of smoke. And you see the smoke, and you can tell it was a big one. It's normally, it was huge. And you could see it from West Ashley, James, wherever you were at, you can see it.
Fire erupted from the building as Brown arrived. He set to work helping to cut holes in the building to get more water lines inside, amid growing chaos as word spread that Mulkey was not the only one still inside.
It got to the point where I just shut down. And then at that point, we realized that there was more. 2 turned into 3, 3 turned into 5, 6, 7, 8. And at that point, it was 8, and I was like, where do you go?
So what happened here? In the end, 9 firefighters died. Steve and I have both been in fires very similar to this. And some of the reasons this happened, the main wasn't one, it started on the loading dock. There was not adequate sprinklers on that loading dock. Now you can imagine the furniture with all the plastics and the polyesters, they burn extremely hot. So it raced fairly quickly through the building, and they had large racks filled with all of these combustibles, including their storage in the back. What happened is some of the racks tipped over, not bolted down. They didn't have enough sprinklers. It wasn't adequate for the fire load that they had. You need to take a look at your facility. I mean, are you guys storing things that are highly flammable and combustible and kind of rat packing them away into one area of the building? These are the things we need to look at. And they're easy to be ignored. So we need to talk about housekeeping with our employees and address those issues. Steve, let's talk a little bit about the interior fire hazards.
Sure. If you look at your own facilities and as you're listening to this and taking this information and think about what your facility looks like. You see one of these photos up here with the combustible liquid storage cabinet. That's great. Like anything, everybody has got to use those in the facilities. If you just randomly have combustible liquid, gasoline, things like that laying around, those you can have all the cabinets you want, but it's still not going to do any good. So we look at things like electrical. That's a major hazard in a lot of facilities. And it's not just electrical equipment, it's how the electricity flows through the building, what implements, what machines are using what electricity. And a lot of it goes back to maintenance or the lack of maintenance. A lot of these problems can be broken down and traced back to that. And then, of course, we've got smoking. This day and age, we don't have a lot of, if any, smoking in buildings. That's part of the administrative controls that management can implement. The employees know they're not supposed to smoke in the building, but that needs to be, of course, enforced.
The other thing about smoking, you guys, the big fires that Steve and I have been to, the ones that burnt up a 48-plex, those were typically caused by smoking. Here's why. People are sitting out on their decks and they're flicking their cigarettes. The wind's catching it. It's getting up underneath the siding. It climbs up into the attic. And once it gets into the attic, it's lights out, right? They may be doing it 20 feet from the building, but they're still not discarding it properly. A lot of people, when they discard that smoking, they're simply putting it out in some type of a container that isn't metal. And that gets up underneath the siding and so forth.
So we talk about some of the causes and some of the fire hazards within the facilities. A lot of facilities do hot work. They have permits for hot work. The city or the municipal entity knows that they're doing hot work in there. But welding, grinding, cutting, you need to be aware of the surroundings when those employees are doing that type of work. And then we discussed a little bit about maintenance already. You can see that machine in the center there. If things aren't maintained properly, and that goes back to who's responsible for maintaining that equipment and at what time frames. Is it monthly, daily, quarterly? So that can become a very, very large hazard. So we've talked about mostly general industry, manufacturing. Well, what about on the construction side of the house?
Well, before we move on to that, I just want to address a few things. If you walk by a machine every day and it smells hot, it smells like something's burning, don't ignore it. These little fires turn into big fires. If you have a ballast up on your light fixture that is going bad, don't ignore that. That may turn into a large fire. Some of the statistics from construction fires, 5 deaths per year. That kind of surprises me that it's, thank goodness it's only that much, but it seems to me like I was expecting it to be higher. 60 plus injuries, a lot of damage, millions of dollars worth of damage done to that. So these are things we need to talk about. Steve, general industry versus construction. Let's talk about some of these things because it can get a little bit confusing for some people.
It can, you're right. Most municipalities use the IFC or the International Fire Code. And that's seems to be redone about every 5 or 6 years. And then on the construction side, you may be looking at the OSHA codes, and they may not always match up.
Right.
Here's just a couple of small examples. You look at 75 feet of travel for an extinguisher, according to the IFC, but, OSHA says it can be 100 feet. So, if you look at both of those, it's like federal law compared to state law. You're always going to go with the most stringent laws.
Right. So if your, excuse me, if your local fire department tells you that this is what they require, that's the rule you should follow. OSHA will always use the most stringent one. And if that happens to be from the International Fire Code, so be it. And most fire departments follow International Fire Code. Steve, there was a fatal fire in Charlotte, North Carolina. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, this started in a construction site, and it became a very, very large fire. And you can see by the slide there that two of the workers perished in this fire. And it started in an insulation foam trailer. It's still on site, but not part of the major build. And so the question that we have to look at, if you're a general contractor, if you're ultimately responsible for this site, is how hard are we checking our subcontractors? Are we making sure that they're following the rules also? Because ultimately we're responsible. So let's take a quick look at this construction fire.
Well, thanks for staying up with us here tonight at 11 o'clock. I'm Colin Mayfield.
And I'm Vanessa Rufus. We start tonight with a community grieving. 2 people are confirmed dead in that massive fire that destroyed a South Park construction site yesterday morning.
That's right. Officials, they say it's one of the worst fires that Charlotte has seen in decades, and they say the unstable structure is slowing them in getting a closer look at the suspected source of this blaze. Now, officials said that 2 workers were missing after the construction site first evacuated. Now, tonight, they confirmed they recovered 2 bodies from the burned apartment building. One has been identified as 30-year-old DeMonte Sherrill. Fire officials did not name the other person. We're told Sherrill was a family man, a father of 4, and a hard worker. Fire officials tonight saying they tried their best to save everyone they could.
Everyone did the best they could. I think they did well beyond the best they could. I think they did a fantastic job in light of the situation that they faced.
And we're going to dive into that situation they faced in just a bit. But we can tell you as we speak, the investigation goes on into how this exactly happened. Right now, officials say this was all an accident, but of course they are still combing through all of the evidence here. We're joined now by WCNC Charlotte's Julia Kaufman, who brings us the latest on what we know so far. Julia.
Hey, Vanessa, Colin. We're out right in front of the site where the fire happened yesterday. It's pretty dark out here, so you might not be able to see it, or what's left of it anyway, but it's really a devastating sight and a devastating reminder of what happened. And of course, the 2 lives lost. The fire chief says firefighters did everything they could to try to get to the 2 men that were trapped inside, but they couldn't. And they actually ended up needing to be saved themselves.
They had gone up and done a search, and were searching in an area, obviously, with limited visibility, and getting in there and trying to locate them. They didn't visually see them. Obviously, they were going by sound and trying to get to them, but were unable to get there before conditions changed.
Chief Reginald Johnson detailing what led to firefighters having to be escorted out of the burning building before it collapsed. Sadly, family, friends, and the Charlotte community are now mourning the 2 lives lost.
Our hearts ache for those we have lost, for the dreams and aspirations that have been extinguished too soon.
All that's left of the site is mostly charred wood and collapsed walls. City leaders shared updates on the fire investigation and their condolences Friday afternoon.
So there you have it. Remember, you need to pay attention to what your subcontractors are doing. They may not have that safety culture like you guys have. So pay attention to what they're doing. Steve, you want to give us, talk to us a little bit about what are some of the common causes of construction fires?
Sure. And the size of that fire, it goes back to what we were talking about in emergency action plan about accountability. You know, had those firefighters known possibly that nobody was on site, everybody was out, we certainly would hit that fire in a much different fashion than going in and trying
You're
to
addressing
extinguish it.
the furniture fire.
Well, both, you know,
Yeah.
if they knew that nobody was on this site.
Right.
So that's, you know, accountability is huge when we show up. So some of the common causes, you know, I got 2 or 3 different sources for this, but believe it or not, the most common cause for fires on construction sites is on-site cooking. And, you know, as I go around and do audits, I see microwaves, hot plates, things like that. You see them almost on a daily basis. And, you know, as we're looking at these construction site fires, the fire prevention engineered factors of a building are not all complete until the building is complete. So that leaves the building very vulnerable to construction fires. So, you know, you look at hot work on site, you know, they're setting steel, the plumbers are doing work. So they're grinding, cutting, welding, a lot of welding going on. And then in the place where we live,
yeah, temporary heaters. We've been to numerous fires for these temporary heaters. People are trying to keep that sand pile warm. They're trying to keep an area warm. They're trying to heat up something that's curing. And a lot of times they'll throw a tarp over it that isn't approved. So I have been to just stick buildings that have burnt up completely. It's amazing what they will do, how they will burn. So it's important to pay attention to what you guys are using as temporary heat and what your subcontractors are using as temporary heat. I have also been to a very large church that burnt down here in Fargo because of a plumber. When we jump back a little bit to the hot works, he was soldering pipes together up in the ceiling area. Nobody really knew he was up there. He went home for the day. It sat there and smoldered, started a big fire, and burnt the building down.
So we look at some of the other causes. You know, we've touched on on-site smoking, pretty prevalent in the construction industry still. You know, they think it's okay for me to smoke since I'm largely outside. The building isn't encapsulated yet. You know, we're framing, we're pouring concrete, whatever. So that's still something that we have to look at. This kind of goes to a housekeeping issue of removing an excessive combustible material. You know, you can clean up at the end of the day or as the day goes on. But don't let it pile up until the end of the week or the end of the month. You know, try and get rid of that stuff as fast as you can. And then, of course, you know, electrical service to the job site. You know, that's always temporary, and it seems to be could be kind of sketchy at some time. But the workers that are on that site need electricity, and in the absence of, you know, using an engine actuated machine, they need electricity. So a lot of times that electrical service is run and is just temporary and may not be following all the standards, right?
You know, another thing to keep in mind is arson. Do you have a disgruntled employee? And it's not necessarily always just going to be a disgruntled employee. There's a lot of arsonists out there. They enjoy setting fires. They like watching it. That's just their behavior. So take a look at where is your dumpster located? Is it right next to the building loaded with a whole bunch of combustibles? I mean, this is going to be really attractive to an arsonist. Are those, you know, jumping back to what Steve was talking about, excessive combustible material? Do you have a pile of combustible sitting in the middle of that sticked up building? Again, something very attractive to an arsonist. Try to eliminate anything that might be attractive to somebody that's trying to start a fire. Meaning you have good housekeeping, you have a good clean site. Steve, some of the other exterior fire hazard issues, what might they be?
Well, we've got, you know, we talked about smoking. So smoking containers out there, make sure that if you've got them, they're using them. Dumpsters, Clark discussed that. You know, they're going to be filled. Typically, they're emptied once or twice a week. Make sure that's getting done because as for an arsonist, that's easy, low-hanging fruit, easy pickings. Damaged conduit and gas line services. This is something that we see a lot here in the upper Midwest because of the weather and the snow. So, you know, we get heavy snow and you've got snow removal, you've got skid steers, front end loaders, pickups, and they're moving snow. They may not even be aware that they've hit the gas service. in the back of the building in the alley. And they're just trying to do their job at 3 in the morning, and they hit that service. They can't smell it. They can't see it. And then pretty soon you've got an issue. And then, electrical equipment, junction boxes, service lines, things like that, make sure they're up to code and up to standard. Take a walk around the outside of your facility on a regular basis, and you'll see some of these things.
To get back to that gas line, especially during the summer months, we go on a lot of hit gas lines by construction crews. One thing you have to remind your people, if they hit a gas line, they need to call 911, right? They need to get the provider out there of that gas, of that natural gas out there to take care of it. Make sure you tell them to shut down their equipment. Don't leave things running. Don't have a cigarette while you're standing there waiting for emergency to get there. They need to shut down their equipment, and they need to get away from the scene. Don't ignore it if you see dirt and everything blowing up through a hole. That's probably a hit gas line.
Mm-hmm. Happens quite often.
Steve, what are some of the common safety violations that you're seeing out there?
Well, as we go through these facilities for different reasons, one of the most common things we see is blocked emergency exits. And this kind of goes back to your emergency action plan, where your employees have got to have a safe way to exit the building. And if those same employees or different employees are stacking things in front of it, a lot of these exits are not going to be able to be used by your employees. You've got faulty emergency lighting and, excessive use of extension cords and temporary lighting. That could be a big hazard in these facilities. And then, of course, we always see fire extinguishers that either are missing, they're not the correct size, they haven't been maintained, or they're not going to work.
Yeah, and jumping back to the blocked emergency exits, it's not just blocking your employees from getting out of the building, it's blocking the emergency personnel from getting into the building to minimize the amount of damage that's going to be done to that facility during that emergency. Continue with some of the safety violations, Steve.
A lot of facilities have sprinkler systems, and some of these pipes run exterior of the false ceiling, the wall. So you see pipes here with sprinkler heads. And a lot of people will want to hang things on there. And that system is not designed for that excess weight. You shouldn't touch those sprinkler heads at all. They may malfunction. You'd have a large mess on your hands with a lot of water, or malfunction to the point where they're not going to work when they need to work. And then, of course, your alarms. If you have smoke alarms that are not hardwired, make sure you're checking the batteries and things like that. So,
also, with those alarms, a lot of times you will find subcontractors, especially carpet installers, that will cover those smoke detectors because the heat that they're producing may set off the alarm. You just need to make sure that they take those covers off when they're finished with their project. We see that a lot, and so forth. So, Clark, as we're going through and doing, our visits on site and audits, as the case may be, what are some of the things that we're overlooking? What don't we see? When Steve and I used to inspect buildings when we were at the fire department, we would look for pretty much the same thing we're looking for now. A lot of times we overlook certain things like the break room. What are you using? Are they all in good shape? We see a lot of microwaves stacked on top of each other underneath cabinets. Are they really old? Do they make a sound when they're operating? These cooking appliances use a lot of energy and they heat up very quickly. Some of the bigger fires, not huge fires, have been through microwaves. They start on fire, they get up into the cabinets, and it's a room and contents fire. So pay attention to the areas where people are using space heaters, personal heaters underneath their desk, and that break room where all this stuff is plugged into maybe one outlet, right? Not always plenty of outlets in these break rooms. So they start running extension cords. Take a look at that today and see if your break room is up to code, or maybe it needs to be redesigned in somehow. Steve, what should we not do during a fire?
Well, very important for your employees to read these. You need to be aware of these. Their job is not to put out large fires. Essentially, extinguishers are there every 75 feet, and that's to assist your employees to get out of the building if they do run into a fire, if the fire is somehow between them and the exit. So those extinguishers are not there to put fires out. You know, that's what your emergency services are for. Ignoring alarms, you know, that's huge. You know, the sky is falling syndrome. If you alarms go off 99 times out of 100, we know it's nothing, but it's that one time that will create big problems. So, you know, tell your employees if the alarms go off, chances are that it is something and they need to get out of the building. So don't ignore those, please. Once you're out of the building, this is big. You know, we do this as part of a public education drive for the general public. But once you're out of the building, don't go back in. Clark, you've talked numerous times about the importance of cell phones to people.
Yep.
You know, your whole life is in your cell phone, and if you happen to leave that in your break room, or it's in, you know, maybe your locker because you can't have it out on the workspace, don't go in and try and retrieve that. All the things in there and all the information is all replaceable. So once you go outside, you should have a designated person in your organization that will talk to the media. You know, the media is going to be looking for all kinds of information. That's their job, is to find information. You know, and not so much that you're going to say the wrong things, but, you know, you may not have all the information. So, you know, let your designated person to speak to the media when it comes to the flow of information like that. And then, like Clark said before, once you get out of the building, you're not necessarily away from everything. Don't leave the scene, you know, unless you talk to somebody that's responsible for your accountability. Because let's say it's cold, you know, and you're going to get in your car because you're cold. Well, you know, nobody really knows we're here. Nobody really cares. They're doing their jobs. And we're just going to, it's obvious we're not going to work tonight because the building's on fire. So we're just going to go home. That's the wrong answer. You need to let somebody know where you are and what you're doing.
Right. And Steve, back to talking to the media, it may be important or to your advantage to have a public information officer in your emergency action plan so that person, so that everybody knows that the media comes up to them, because they can be very aggressive to try to get information at that moment. They know who to send them to. So you may want to talk about having a public information officer put into your emergency action plan, right?
So if your facility does have a fire, Clark, you know, we know the ripple effects are going to be huge, but, you know, let's just discuss some of what happens after the fact.
Okay, let's just use a fire as an example. What if we have lost life, like the 9 firefighters that died in Charlotte, right? That's terrible. I don't really need to get into that any further than it's a bad thing. Loss of the building. And it's not just necessarily, you may just have a room and content fire in that building, but the water damage that's created from the firefighting tactics could destroy that entire building and put it out of service. Damage to the equipment, waters, you know what water does to electronic equipment or anything with steel or electricity running to it. It could be devastating. The smoke damage, to try to get rid of that odor is very difficult. Fire damage, we talked about water. Cost of new construction. With what's going on right now, are you going to be able to rebuild that facility that you've been operating out of for the last 75 years? You're going to be able to do it for what it's insured for now? I don't know. It's kind of up in the air right now. OSHA citations. Are you going to get any? How much are they going to be? Something you need to think about. What if your employees leave? We're not going to be back up in operation for another 6 months. Well, they still have bills to pay. They still have things that they are responsible for. So they're going to look for other employment, and they may never come back. Supply chain. You guys know this. If you're making a product and you're shipping it out every day, and that receiver isn't getting that product anymore, they're going to find a new one. And they may like it better than what they were getting before. They may save money doing it that way, and you may never get them back. And of course, loss of business. Maybe it may put you out of business. If your building burns down and you can no longer produce what you were producing or do what you were doing, there may be a city 100 miles away that says, guess what? If you guys move here, we'll give you a 10-year tax abatement. It truly happens. So it can affect the community in various ways and not very good ways. Steve, how about the employees? Let's not forget about them. What's the ripple effect on the employees?
Right, and as we know that the employees are the most important resource that any manufacturing or any business has, really. And if we don't take care of them, so what are the effects on them? Loss of income. Clark talked about, is the facility going to be down for a while? Are we not producing for a while? Well, these people still have bills. They still have families to take care of. What about a loss of benefits? In this world, most husbands and wives both work. They may not have health insurance and other benefits available through the spouse's job, so they may lose their health benefits. And then, of course, their mental health. That's huge, and that's stuff that you just can't fix. That's stuff that stays with you for a long, long time. And they may not be able to join the workforce after that. What if the business relocates? Maybe they were thinking about it prior to, but now that we don't have a building anymore, we're going to relocate and build in another town, another community. So, do you follow the business? Do you move your family? So that's something else that we have to think of. The effects on the family, is not just the employee, but it's their family members also. And then, of course, injuries, to employees, is this something they can recover from and come back, to work at a later date? Or are they going to be permanently without a job because they're physically unable to do it? And then, of course, fatalities, and this is, this is why we have these plans, is to take care of our employees, because like I said, they are the most important resource to us.
Right. So folks, remember, have that emergency action plan and make sure that it is updated. A lot of people set it aside, put it in a binder, put it up in the corner, and never touch it. Take a look at it regularly. Make sure it's updated. Steve, some takeaway thoughts of today.
Well, like you said, Clark, every facility, every organization has to develop a plan. And, like I stated before, that you can have the best plan in the world, but if your employees are not aware of that plan, they're not trained in that plan, and they don't know what their part is in that plan, then it's really no good at all. So, and then like anything, any piece of equipment, any tool that we have, it's got to be maintained. Don't just come up with a plan and say, yep, this is great, all the employees know about it, and then stick it in the file cabinet and move on. It's got to be revisited. It's got to be maintained just like anything else, because like this says, lives do depend on it. And what is our goal at the end of the day? And I think everybody is included in this. Our goal as an organization, our goal as an employee, our goal as safety professionals is to have everybody go home at the end of the day in the same condition that they showed up. So
we'd like to thank you guys for joining us today. We enjoyed it. If you have any questions, I think now is the time that we can go ahead and take those.
Clark, I do have one question that was posted into the chat. If you guys could please discuss safety tips regarding portable heaters, both in a workplace and then at home.
Well, one thing at home you need to think about: is it a carbon monoxide problem? Is this a clean burning heater? If it tips over, will it shut off automatically? If it gets low oxygen, will it shut off automatically? You need to look at that and make sure that that's on the manufacturer's specifications.
Is it UL listed?
Is it UL listed? Right. And as far as construction, make sure there's nothing wrong with putting a certified tarp over a heater to heat up a pile of sand. you can do that, but it needs to be the proper tarp. It can't just be ones that somebody brought in and decided to do that with. Really overloading that, if it's going to be an electric heater, it's the overloaded circuit that becomes the problem, because you're plugging a whole bunch of stuff into this one thing, then you throw an electric heater on there, you're going to overload that circuit. So make sure that it's UL listed, and you're using the proper tarp. It's not too close to any type of a combustible, and you should be fine.
Thank you. There's one more question. If you could please revisit the talking points that you both discussed about employees visiting with the media. I'm guessing maybe the question is about, again, what should the plan be? If you could revisit that, please.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, in the fire service, what we had a public information officer. Okay, so when that media, and again, I mentioned they get aggressive. They do. That's their job, is to get information. That they want to try to find a sexy story, right? So they're going to ask anybody. So we would just tell them, over there is our staging point for media, and this is the person that's responsible for talking to them. And he's going to give them the information that we have at the time, if it's appropriate. So if you're a large company, you may want to have one, maybe two, we called them PIOs, public information officers, that have some type of training on dealing with the media. It's important that they have some of that training, that they can know what to ask, know what to say, know when to say it. Obviously, you can't give out personal information. You know, if you have an injury or a death, they don't want that information getting out right away and being spread across the social media right now. The family members need to be notified. So it's important that somebody in that organization is aware of what some of the rules and regulations are concerning that.
Thank you. There's no more questions. If you want to go to the next slide. So we do have a final poll that we would like feedback. We use this to, see where we're at with providing these topics to our guests and audience. So if you would rate the webinar, I don't know how long. Heather, do you know how long they get?
We can keep it up if you want to keep moving. All right, we're going to close the poll now.
Okay, thank you. Clark, can you go to the next slide, please?
Folks, we're having a little bit of difficulty. I am hitting the button. I don't know if
You may have to click on the screen, Clark, with the mouse.
There we go. All right, so if you guys do have any questions, you can take down Clark and Steve's contact information. Feel free to email them directly. Reach out if you have specific concerns, because sometimes those locations that you're in might have, something that relates directly to you. And again, a little bit, just a reminder, if you do need assistance with your safety needs, anything from something small of questions to coming into your facility, please reach out. We'd be happy to help you. A final thank you to our partners, Tri-State Safety Association, MPMA, Fargo-Moorhead, HBA, ABC, Minnesota, North Dakota chapter, NRASB, BLD Connection, and Lakes Area Manufacturing Alliance. Without our partners getting the word out to their members, we wouldn't be able to reach as many people on these webinars. So we do thank you very much for participating today and joining us. And